Welcome to the Comstock channel. I'm Brianne Hendrickson, and today I have a very special guest, David Kruse from Comstock Investments. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Brianne. Looking forward to this.
Thanks for coming on. We're going to talk about weather, and not just in one state where you are or where I am. We're going to talk complete weather. So I guess let's dive in.
We'll look at the climate condition, I guess, is where we'll start. What this is, they call it NOAA's Coral Reef Watch, but what it essentially is the water temperatures around the world. The red is warm temperatures. The blue is colder temperatures. And you can see around the equator right now that there's a lot of red, and that's what happens, the warm waters of an El Nino. And the El Nino, by most measurements, is pretty solidly in place at this time. Probably one little anomaly that happened this year is you can see that stretch of blue water that is west of the West Coast, California. And earlier this year, that had been right up against the coast. And they call that the Pacific Meridional Mode, if I can pronounce that. But that was one of the reasons that really kept the El Nino from breaking down our drought this summer. It is now, you can see, so there's some red there between it and the coast, and that probably should have an impact here later on. Yes, the warm water off that coast that puts more water into the atmosphere, that comes in across the Midwest. You notice there's a lot of warm temperatures, even in, like I say, the northern Pacific. That we're seeing in the hurricane season now. Warm water really fuels hurricanes. The warmer the water, the worse they are. And but one thing that was an interesting anomaly this year is, although we've had some record warm water temperatures in the Gulf, the hurricanes have essentially stayed away. I think one of them crossed, Florida up the coast, but the recent ones have been staking off into the Atlantic. Reason for that is the Bermuda High is out of position. It's a little to the northeast. And then there's also a ridge over the central United States. And so that's pushing it all that way. The interesting part is what that is contributing to our dry conditions in the heartland. Many times in the fall, we will get hurricanes coming into the Gulf. And along with that, we get a lot of moisture that gets pushed up into the center part of the country. And we haven't seen that happen. Therefore, we've got a drought going on here. This is the most recent, I think, NOAA drought map. You can see that, the absence of that Gulf moisture, very serious drought situation in Texas, Louisiana. And that goes right up the Mississippi River Valley. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing, what could be some record lows in Mississippi water levels. That's impacting the barge traffic as things are now. And it's going to take a considerable amount of moisture to bring that river level back on that part. Hopefully that'll happen here in another month or so. This is a comparison from last year to this year. And you can see that there was a substantial amount of drought, a year ago, but the location of that drought moved into more of the center of the nation and intensified. And so we've actually got a much worse drought condition at the end of the growing season this year than we had last year. This depicts, of course, our subsoil moisture levels and the absence of that, I guess. And you can see that there's some very, very parched, dry conditions here, in the central Corn Belt at this time. Last year, I believe at this time, we were already starting to get some rains and beginning to replenish this depleted subsoil moisture condition. The crop is essentially getting by on whatever moisture is left in the ground. I think there is maybe one rain system coming, but I think where we're at, we've had 0.2 of an inch of rain this month. That's not much of a contribution to anything. And the temperatures did cool, which helped. But you can see that we've got a very depleted subsoil moisture condition here at the end of our growing season.
Now, will it take a lot for that number to go back up where we are?
It
and
will.
the twos and stuff?
It will. You're correct, Brianne. The situation, is right now it'd be very difficult to get a harvest delay. because I mean the first couple 4 inches or whatever is going to soak right in, and nobody's hardly even going to notice it's wet. And you have to take a little to get mud. And again, you need to get so much moisture going as this starts to make the tiles run into the streams and the rivers and improve the Mississippi River basin level. And so, yes, it's going to take, and we're going to run out of time. Basically, you got maybe October before, you start freezing up. And and then you're relying on, winter snow, next spring water, next spring rains. It all becomes, I guess, a little more risky as time goes on as far as getting these subsoil moisture levels replenished before our next crop season. That's really what got us through where we're at, is that we had a pretty full profile of subsoil moisture when we went into the year. It was extremely variable as to who got rain and who didn't. But I think at this stage of the game here that nobody really has any subsoil moisture left. And so this is something we'll look ahead to the next crop year about. This essentially shows that we've actually had some record dry conditions, from August to September. In this main part of the Corn Belt, Iowa and southern Minnesota particularly got hit hard. I did want to show the little contrast between in the Corn Belt. You can see that the western part of the Corn Belt is in much worse condition than the eastern Corn Belt. You get into Illinois and Indiana and particularly Ohio. They've had some moisture and they've had some relief there. So there is the Mississippi River almost divides it to a certain extent there. That things to the east of the river are a little better than to the west. This is actually I guess the data on the state of Iowa. And I guess I thought it was kind of interesting because the D0, the D4 are the varying degrees of drought. And you don't get much closer to 100% than 99.81. So that's the situation for Iowa at this time. And again, I go back and I compare that to last year, and we were 67%, in drought, but we were also getting moisture. We were getting rains and stuff. And by the time we got to when it froze, last year, we had a substantial recharge in our subsoil moisture levels. And, our current forecasts are not that plentiful with moisture yet. And so time will tell. But we have a little time, but as we all know, winter's coming. Mentioned the Mississippi River level. We're right back down there where we were a year ago when things are shut down. I got the chance to be in Memphis and Vicksburg to see what the river looked like. They were half loading barges and having some extreme difficulty, and that increases the barge rate real significantly. And this is also our export outlet. And this is the market that's reflected by the Chicago Board of Trade. The Chicago Board of Trade is settled by some, river port deliveries. And so that's the number. And you go away from there and into the Western Corn Belt or whatever, that's why we have differentiation in basis. And so last year, the Chicago Board of Trade was leading everything down because of the poor export situation. And I fear that it's not impossible that we could get some pressure from that here again this year. I'm going to flip over to the southern hemisphere now, to South America. This particular, just to give you an idea maybe of where the crops are grown in Brazil. There's some areas that are double crop areas, such as the Mato Grosso. You can see that the Mato Grosso and Mato Grosso do Sul into Goiás, that's the primary crop growing region at this for this. We farmed when we were there in Bahia, and Bahia had some first crop corn, but it was really a one crop region. You get over into Mato Grosso, and there are two crops, and so they end up a lot of production comes out of that west central Brazil. Just to give a little picture, this I think it was Eric Snodgrass from Nutrient Ag. He wanted to give a reflection of what it looked like there for the size, and Brazil's huge. Give you an idea how many states that you can fit into Brazil's production level area. Well, in South America, they have a wet and a dry season, and the wet season essentially starts about now, September, and then picks up steam and lasts into the first half of the next year. And to give you a picture between what was wet and what is dry is that literally when it's dry, it does not rain, and there's just nothing for a couple 3 months there. And I've been there before when the wet season finally kicked in, and it's kind of interesting that everything is covered with dust. That dry season or whatever, you go walk by all the car lots or whatever, everything just has a coat of that red soil on it. And then when you get the first belly washer in the beginning of the wet season, everything is then mud running down the street, and it kind of has to flush everything out for the time being there. But so they're going to get started with their soybean planting. I think it's a little slow at this point. They're wet. The monsoon season has not kicked in yet. Sometimes it doesn't kick in until October or so on that part of it. But and then on the back side of it, they want to get that soybean crop in September and October if they can. You get past November and the yield is impaired on soybeans. And so that's critical that they get it done by then. But then in the double crop regions like the Mato Grosso, they need to get those soybeans out. And so that harvest oftentimes be in January, February. And they got to get the corn in. And they use a very short day variety corn. And then it's important that, how long that rainy season hangs on. Because by May, if it's a late planted corn, by May, it needs moisture that it isn't going to have. And so the gist of it is that if you can get that soybean crop in early and get it going, well, then that sets the whole tone for the rest of the season. Likely the harvest will be timely, and you can get the second crop corn in timely, and it will have enough time to mature and yield well. This gives a picture of the current situation, and if you kind of notice there that the red and the yellow, that's the rainfall. And of course, where there's no color, they aren't getting anything. And so this kind of depicts that for most of northern Brazil, west central, whatever, the monsoon has not kicked in yet. There's no moisture. They need a couple of inches to get started planting, but even then, they sometimes wait for more consistent rains because they've had situations where they get an early rain and then it goes dry again for a little while, and they ended up having to replant. The area that's getting rain is in southern Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and they're getting too much rain. I mean, there's inches and inches and inches, and so they are drowning right now. And then you go down a little farther is where the drought this year was in Argentina, and they really aren't getting much yet. They still overall would be in under drought conditions yet. Really have not seen that, what you could say, break. Everybody's expecting that it will, but it hasn't done so yet. This is what's driving that current situation. There's a pressure system, a ridge that's off of the coast of Brazil, kind of depicted by the arrow and the circle there, and it's what's bringing that rain into southern Brazil and Paraguay and Uruguay. For the monsoon rains typically come in from the northeast, and they have not done so, and so it really has not set up right yet for it to begin the wet season up there. What happens is the moisture normally comes in from the northeast, where that arrow is, goes over the Amazon and then actually swings around and comes back into the central Brazil or whatever from the east. Where we were in Bahia, there was 1,000-foot escarpment all along the border of that state or province. And so when this moisture-laden air would come from the west, it would hit that 1,000-foot rise and it would lift it. And there was a plateau on the east side of that, and that would generate excellent rains. from that basically using the topography and from the seasonality of the wet season. And so that's why it was such a high producing area. But this is what it is now. But this is not what we want it. What the Brazilians want it to be. It's just fine for me. I don't care. I guess I'd like to see some crop problems down there for our sake with the markets here. Everyone's making this a big anticipation that again that they're going to have this great crop. Well, time will tell. This just looks at the same thing quite similarly. You can see that the moisture is down to the south, and it's still not coming in to the main part of Brazil. In other words, we can't say as of the 19th of September that the rainy season has started, and the longer this holds off or whatever, the more impact it starts to have on their soybean planting. And as I mentioned, that will basically roll down the hill as to when they can get the corn in and out and all of that. So, we're in an El Nino situation. Normally, northern Brazil or this part of it, Mato Grosso, gets a little less moisture during an El Nino. The problem with that is they don't need a full 100%. They can raise an excellent crop off about 80% of normal. And whereas that's a little different than here in the Midwest, we need all we can get. It seems like on that side of it. But right now they're too wet in the south. The rainy season hasn't started in the north, and essentially Argentina hasn't seen the drought there break either. I think we've made a lot of assumptions about El Nino. There's an old time benchmark that here in the Corn Belt or whatever, there's a 70% chance of an above trend line yield during an El Nino. So therefore, we should have had 181.5 or whatever where the USDA started out with in their forecast for this crop season, 52 something bushel of soybeans. Well, we know that hasn't happened. Just on the backside of that, 30% of the time in an El Nino, you don't get a trend line yield. And this is the anomaly. This is the 30% year. And so we've taken some of that edge off as we'll see as harvest progresses here. I'm anticipating that it has harmed our soybean crop, and that there'll be a further reduction in the October production report as far as production goes. At the same time, there's sure a gaggle of bears out there on the demand side that seem to think that our USDA exports will come down further too. And so it's going to be hard to get that carry out any tighter than what it is. But I guess time will tell. I'm not a very good bear sometimes, so I'm kind of optimistic as to what happens. And right now, as I see the weather set up for this next year, things have got to change. We're too dry in the heartland. We have basically depleted our subsoil moisture levels. And the rainy season appears to be may potentially coming in with some delays in South America, and that's not good for their crop outlook. And so, this can change next month, but at some point in time here we get to winter, and there's already, I believe, the Farmer's Almanacs is already forecasting this will be a really snowy winter. We'll see. So was 1936. I'll point that out. We know what happened after that. Yeah. Dr. Elwood Taylor, I keep waiting for this. He's studied tree rings and he's studied pond sentiment, and he's found an 89-year drought cycle for the Midwest. And his target year, and he's been saying this for years, was 2025. And so when I look at the situation today, I guess until we're drowned in, which seems to me when we go from one extreme to the other, I'm still looking forward at that potential forecast. He alludes it that it'll be similar to 1936, and so I guess time will go. But there's this huge expectation that the El Nino is going to produce above trend line yield crops, but some of the other cycles are not in that position. And as we've seen, a lot of things are out of position. Everything from the Bermuda High to the PMM in the Pacific, and now even to some delays here. And so it's something that we'll all keep our eyes on and see how things go.
So as harvest season is starting, would any rain even help, or would that just kind of put a bunch of farmers in a pickle in the sense of they can't get into the field to even harvest?
Well, I guess right now we could use a little rain just to reduce the fire hazard. I mean, this is getting so dry out in some of these fields or whatever that that could be a problem here as time goes on. As I've said, that it's going to take a lot of rain before you could conjure up a harvest delay, because the ground is so parched that the first few inches are just going to soak in and barely slow anybody down in the field. It's going to have to be an extended period to be able to replenish that, to make that happen. And so it would look today as I drive down the roads here that next week the soybeans are going to be rolling. They're coming on fast. Corn right there at the same time, it looks like it's going to be an accelerated harvest.
Are you worried about, we are kind of in a drought, and we've also talked about this in the past. Has this drought, is it keep on affecting the projected yield? Are you worried about at the end, Pro Farmer put out their numbers, USDA's put out their numbers, but I feel like nobody's gotten any rain. I think we may have gotten rain for like a day or two, but it's at the point where it really can't do anything. So do you think we're going to see...
We need harvest right now. We need some harvest to get out there and to see what's really there. I think it's just going to be extremely variable. It's going to be planting date, variety, soil type, the luck of the rain. I'm feeling almost perplexed because where we live, it's not a very large area. We had an inch of rain on average every week this summer, and I just harvested a 261 bushel corn crop, which is a record for our farm. At the same time, our soybeans don't seem to have the top pods, and as I said, they're having to pull everything now to fill. It may be the wrong timing for beans more so than maybe the corn was ahead of it enough. But I think that's what some are thinking. But time will tell here. We need to get out there in the harvest and listen to what the yields are.
All right, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for hopping on today.
You're welcome, Brianne. We're looking for you next time.
For premium content, you can head over to the Comstock Report, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.